that's something that as artists is so important about the heart of where you're coming from and what you're doing, and it's not an easy thing to do. And I would dare say it's a deeply spiritual thing to do, to be uncorrupted, to let your being and your work be uncorrupted when in all phases, right? Like when things are good, when things are bad, and when things are suddenly going so well beyond belief, because that can destroy you too.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte,
Exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Well, Evan, this is a rare and special occasion that's going to be more normal now.
Yeah, not so rare anymore.
Not so rare. We're going back to our roots. Evan and I are in the same room recording this episode, which is pretty special for us because, I mean, that's how this whole thing started.
Yeah.
And we've been on an adventure, I suppose, the last few years. So it's kept us at different places. So we've had to use tech to basically connect that way. And now, not so much. Now we're in the same area, and it's awesome, man. So I'm excited about getting into this one. And we didn't pick a title, but I would say my interpretation of what we're talking about, I would say it's the power and transcendency of art, and how it can cut through so much unexpectedly, and sometimes it just when it's just done authentically and truthfully and vulnerably, it just it can have a profound impact. And so I'll pass it off to you. I don't know, that's kind of my interpretation of what we're getting into today.
Yeah, and maybe just to add a bit more context to this, I mean, by the time this episode comes out, I mean, it will have been, even a few weeks since this sort of phenomenon has happened. But at the moment of recording this, like a couple of weeks ago, there's what a lot of people have probably heard, this song by this guy named, is it Oliver Anthony or Anthony Oliver?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Oh, well, he's a country.
Well, pretty soon we're gonna know.
He's this a country singer who nobody knew anything, like really nobody knew. And he put out this song that just people have just grabbed onto, and he's put out some more music, and I've listened to these songs, and they're my own reaction and response to them has been quite strong as well. Like, it's just like I'm welling up to the music and the words that he's saying. And looking at how many, like at the time of recording this, like his one video has gotten like 50 million plus views in a 2-week time span, right? And so there's just something about this moment of this person who sings with such power and honesty, and like, when you see him sing, like you just know there's no tricks going on. Like, this is just a person who's pouring their heart and soul into this thing, and speaking the truth of what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and to see so many people just responding to that. And it makes me think of the power of art when an artist goes out and says this thing that maybe we're all feeling, that we're all thinking, or just even intuiting, of what's going on in the world or in our lives, and someone says it, and how powerful that can be in so many levels. So I just wanted to throw that in there, just to kind of Just thought it adds a little context to, I think, what we're getting into today.
Yeah, totally. It is an important point, and I think with that song, it hits on things that we're thinking, but we don't necessarily know we haven't necessarily put the words to it or the thoughts to it. You know, some of us more than others. Some of us put a lot of thought into it. But I think one of the things that I was taken with was how it made me feel so connected to everybody, because when I heard the song, I was like, oh man, does that resonate with me? And then I realized, well, this song is like, there's a lot of people this is resonating with. And there's a lot of people, I mean, I haven't met really any of them, but the thing is all of a sudden I go, wow, we see the world the same way. Like we both feel this. Like that's a big thing too. We both feel this.
Yeah.
And we both are interpreting things like in the same way. And these words seem to resonate with us and perfect strangers that I don't even know. And so I think there's something about that. You know, it actually reminds me a little bit of, not that I think that he did it this way at all. Like I think this was something, my interpretation, I could be wrong, but he's on the Joe Rogan podcast. So if for anybody who's interested in finding out more about this artist and they want to kind of get into his story, go check out Joe Rogan, and you can find a 3-hour talk with him, and then you'll really figure out his story. Because you know, I'm not going to be able to do it justice, but the thing is what I've seen of him and what I've heard is like it seems to be that he simply pulled deep from his own soul and said, you know, this is a song that I want to sing. So I don't think there was anything that he was going and going like, oh, I'm going to do this to like win everybody over, and it's going to be this, you know. I don't think it was like that. And Evan and I talk about this a lot, where it's like most of the best art, you might have a sense in yourself like I'm onto something, but you don't really know what's going to happen with it. And I think that was kind of the sense for him. But when I think about a politician, a good politician, and I'm not to say there are any good ones, but the ones at least that usually get into office, they usually say things, the ones that really win us over, they usually say the things that we're thinking and feeling inside, and we feel, or we have the sense like that person's going to go out and do those things that we feel need to get done. And so when you have like, especially when you have a landslide, when a politician wins, if you look at it, it tends to be because they were saying the things that were deep in people's hearts that they were resonating with.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, an artist, I think, does something, and whether it's a movie or a song or something, it somehow hits on something that we all have inside for whatever reason. It's the time, it's the place we're in, and it just lands with us, and we just like, wow, someone gave me a voice. And every listener or every viewer or whatever all of a sudden feels like it was just their voice. But then what's so cool about it is there's 50 million people or whatever that are all saying, this is my voice. And we're all like, wait a minute, that's your voice? That's my voice. That means we're the same. We have the same voice.
Yeah.
How cool is that, right? But neither of us could have said it. And the artist somehow broke that barrier through that membrane of like resistance that was holding that message back, and then boom, and everyone's like, that's it. They put the words to it, they put the sound to it, they put the emotional context to it, and we all agree.
Yeah.
There's something about this that's true. You know, it might not be the ultimate truth, but this is true in its part. Yeah. Yeah,
and profoundly true. And just, you know, like we talk about the power of one of the greatest things that art does as sort of a function is it's a connector, it's a uniter, and you know, it connects us not only to the artist, but it connects us to ourselves, and it connects us to. I'm saying, I think this is why it's like this sort of song and this artist is such an incredible example of the most extraordinary things about art, you know, and its power and how quickly that thing can move, right?
Well, I think that's a really good point, because that was something I think you wanted to bring into this conversation, how this artist, you know, he was unknown. Like no one really knew who he was. He was not on the radar, not on the map at all. And then overnight, one little piece of art, you know, and it's only a few minutes long, all of a sudden, boom, you go from like being in kind of like no one knows who you are to all of a sudden like so many people, if not most people, at least in the medium of this context, are all of a sudden, you are it. You are talked about, you are focused on, you are, and people are telling their friends, like, man, like, I can't tell you how many people have been like, have you heard this guy? Have you heard this song? You know, and people are throwing around, and people have done, you know, Webby did a remix of it, which is awesome, you know, and like, there's just fun, like, things happening, right? And you know, I mean, you know, sometimes I think as an artist, when you ever get this, like, it might be your 15 minutes of fame, and then that's it, you're up there, and then all of a sudden you're not anymore. And that's why I don't think you should make it about that. But I do think there's something about this conversation as well, which is about how, as an artist, you should know that you might think, man, like, my career's going nowhere, nothing's happening. Like, you might even be thinking about giving up. And you should always know that, like, at the turn of a corner, your whole life could change. And that's the beauty of art that way.
Yes. And I mean, with that, there's like, so this is something that I think is worth getting into, because it's a tricky thing. And for this artist, I have concerns, you know, like for the road that lies ahead of him, because the thing is that one of the things that I think was so why it's connected and resonated is because it is coming from such a pure place. It was a song that was just like, I've just got to say these things. I've just got to get this out with no sort of, you know, expectation of, like, because you can't plan, you can't orchestrate the thing that happened. You just put this thing out that was real and true and pure for him, and put his entire sort of being and soul into just doing that thing, right? Which is part of why it became so successful. But at the same time, if you start doing it with that thing of like, of it trying to be, oh, this could be a big success, there's already like a tainting of the thing that's starting to happen, right? Like, yes, it is possible, like something, but you can't. It's one of those weird, not like a paradox, but it's like, it's one of these weird things in life and in art where it's like, you have to come into it with as much purity as possible that you can connect to, because if you start putting in that, oh, this could do a big thing, and oh, I've got to say some really profound, because believe me, there's going to be a bunch of people who start posting things who are just going to try and just copy and mimic what he did, and it's not going to have the same power.
No.
Right? This is the thing about the wake of these things. Someone does something real, and then there's this sort of like, there's this focus that starts to come around that starts spewing off all of these other things. So you get people who are trying to copy the thing, but you know for sure there's people who are coming in trying to be like, let's sign this guy to a deal, right? Let's whatever, like, and there's, you know, even people who might be saying like, we got to shut this guy down. I feel like it's more likely a situation of, you make him the complete opposite of the thing that got him to where he is. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I would say for him, you know, for him to, in any artist that would end up in any type, like not even this level of fame, but even a little bit of success, is to stay true to the thing that was leading you in the beginning. And there are moments, I mean, I've had them in my own career in film, where you begin to get pulled away from your original thing. When I was making the show Soldiers of the Apocalypse, it was just me and my best friend. And we were, you know, really, at the end of the day, it was me and my best friend who wanted to make a action soldier apocalypse type of show, just shooting a film in the backyard really. Like it little kids kind of going like, let's make a movie, let's go in the bush and shoot this thing. And that's when it was at its most purest form, its best place ever. And it was very grassroots, and it was very simple, and it was very like run and gun, and like in a film term that means like okay, let's just like we're not even gonna set up, like let's just kind of get this thing going, let's move, let's film, let's go to the next spot, let's do it. And it was awesome. And you know, if the first day we did the big shoot, like it poured torrential rain, and like we weren't even prepared. We had a few $1,000s to put into the budget, right? Like, and we were just like, okay, we put a bag, like a Safeway bag of some sort, around the camera to protect it from the rain. Like we didn't have proper stuff, and we made it work, man. Yeah. And like the actors and everybody who was involved, like we were soaking wet to the bone, and we were like, okay, let's just go, let's just film this next bit. And we were just into it, and it was awesome. Later on, like we ended up raising like $100,000, we got more money, we got interest, like some network appeal, things like this. And things started at certain points to get pulled away from that original vision. And so, I mean, I only had a small taste of it, like a dabble, but like he's getting a whole pie, like he's getting the whole, like not a very large piece, he's getting the whole thing. Like it's, you know, and when you're there and you have such a big thing all of a sudden, I could only imagine how many temptations to get pulled away from your original source would be.
Well, it's like you said, like, you know, there's this, you know, there's this whole piece that's available to him, but people also want a piece of him.
Yes.
Right. And that's the whole thing where it's, you know, I was watching this guy who I love, Jamal, aka Jamal, and he does these like reaction videos to me. He's one of my favorites, and he watched it like cold and like the video and heard the song, and or maybe it was that one or it was a different one. I saw a couple, but he had said, like he said it as half jokingly, but half jokingly, you know, where he was just like, man, he's like, just stay in your backyard. Like, you know, it was this sentiment that he was saying. He's like, man, just stay in your backyard, because he understood. He's like, for you to keep doing what you're doing his whole life has changed, right? And there's nothing he can really do about that. And it's really about who you continue to be, who you are through this massive change that is now happening, whether he likes it or not. Right? It's like, this change is happening, and who are you going to be in that whole thing? And, you know, there's going to be, you know, he was saying something like, this whole thing is different if he's on some big stage, you know, with lights, and, you know, you can just imagine this. I was imagining this image of him at some awards show, you know, in, you know, sort of a whole fancy new wardrobe and lights and stuff, and there was a part of me that just went like, what a travesty.
Right.
You know, like what, like that's not the thing that has brought him this audience. You know, the thing that people have found is that it's just, here's just a simple guy, you know, doing what country is supposed to do, right? Like 3 chords and the truth. And for everybody out there,
I love that, 3 chords and the truth.
That's the country, 3 chords and the truth, right? Yeah. And for people out there, it's like, I am not a country fan. You just couldn't say that about me. Like, I'm just not. It's not something I listen to. But like, you know, this song and this music that he's making just even transcends those boundaries, right? Where it's like, it's where you still feel it. And so, yeah, like that whole thing of, yeah, what a travesty it would be for him to just become this thing, right? To become just, you know, part of the machine, which is a word that I'm now is kind of become very much a part of my lexicon in my own life. And how terrible it would be for him to be just sort of absorbed and consumed by the machine. And it made me think a little bit about Black Mirror. I've just started. I'm late to the party on it.
You're getting into
but
it.
I've been
It's
getting
awesome.
into it, and I think it was still from the first season. but this episode where, you know, everyone's like on these treadmills.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know,
They have to watch the ads.
playing games, and they have to watch the ads, and they build up credits, and they can go on to this, you know, basically talent show. And he got up there with, like, you know, the glass to his throat, and what an incredible performance from that actor. Holy shit. Like, when he gets up there and he just starts barking out like everything that's so fucked up about what's going on, right? And he got absorbed by the machine. They're like, hey, you're authentic and we like that. You know, like, we want to give you your own, like how do you feel, like twice a week we'll give you a 30-minute slot, you know, da 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 da. And it's just like, and there's something that was so horrifying about that. Was what was horrifying about that episode, right? And like, I felt the same way, like, oh, you're a part of this cautionary tale, like, in a way, because suddenly it's like you've done this thing that has moved people, and there are people who are going to want to try and exploit it and capitalize on it, and that's something that as artists is so important about the heart of where you're coming from and what you're doing. And it's not an easy thing to do. And I would dare say it's a deeply spiritual thing to do, to be uncorrupted, to let your being and your work be uncorrupted when in all phases, right? Like, when things are good, when things are bad, and when things are suddenly going so well beyond belief, because that can destroy you too.
Wow, yeah. I mean, there's so much here to like chew on. It's interesting. So I will say this about the music industry. The music industry has evolved. For those of you who are musicians out there, like, it has evolved to a point where like if you're not in the in group, man, like, your career, you might not have a career. Like, and if you do, it will be so minor. The thing is the music industry is so controlled now. I mean, the film industry is too, but in a bit of a different way. The music industry is so controlled that they kind of auto-tune, they push people out, they give people who are not the best artists more playtime. It's very controlled. And so for you to just kind of break into that without a breakthrough kind of song or a breakthrough album, it's very difficult to do right now. So if you are a musician and you happen to break through that, literally, because think of it like a membrane, you break through that and you're in this whole other thing, you're in a whole new world. That world goes, great, you broke through, fine, let's pull you back into our machine. Like, they don't like breakthroughs untethered. Like, they don't want you free out there. But every once in a while, an artist, like in music, for example, and in film, breaks through, and then immediately the people who control it, who, you know, they try and swoop you up.
Yeah.
And so they don't do it in a way that's they don't come at you and like bully you. Probably that could happen, but the thing is,
there's money to be made.
They seduce you.
Yeah.
They go, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, you know, blah, blah, blah. And pretty soon, before you know it, you know, and especially if you're ill-informed, you're controlled, you've signed a contract, you're pulled into something. With the film industry, it's there's similarities to this too. Like, it's interesting. Like, I won't get into that right now. But the point is that, yeah, as an artist, I really, like, we've talked a bit about this. Here's my point that I want to get to. A lot of people don't like to think of themselves as artists, like actors or filmmakers or musicians. They don't use the word enough. And I think we need to reclaim this word, and we need to really own it. Because as an artist, you need to see yourself as an artist, and not, because when you're an artist, you're not a part of the machine. Like, they don't work together. And artists will get sucked in the machine, and if you don't see yourself as an artist, you'll play by the machine rules. So here's the part about film I'll get into. When I went down to the American film market, you and I went the first time, and then I went several times after. And, you know, I would listen to directors, producers, writers, everybody talk, you know, and sales agents, whatever. And the interesting thing about people who are producers or sales agents, or like, you know, someone who was like a studio head who like was trying to acquire material, they'd always give you, and their talks would always be like, you follow the rules, do what we say, list like this. But when you talk to the filmmakers, and I'm talking about the people that broke through, the people who had successful film careers, they go, don't listen to those fucking idiots. What are you doing? Of course they're going to tell you that, because that's how they're going to buy your shit for the lowest price. That's how they're going to control you. And all the artists who were successful, every single one I ever talked to said, don't listen to sales agents, producers, and studio heads for advice on how to do your art. They're always going to tell you the thing that's going to get them the best deal on your work. They're always going to, they're car salesmen, right? And the artists were all like, you got to fucking buck the system, especially the filmmakers. And I find this so interesting because, you know, as a filmmaker myself, there's something I've always noticed that's very interesting, and it's very unique to filmmakers. But a lot of people can relate to it. But people who get called to film, and especially the people I've seen succeed at film, they have a buck the system attitude. They have a little bit of a, what I like to call a fuck you attitude, where it's like, I have a vision, and I don't want to compromise on it. Now you got to convince me to compromise on it. You got to sell me on why it's not going to be this way. But I have this in my mind. And the other thing that I noticed about the successful filmmakers, they saw their own vision and their own work as valuable. And a lot of artists, when especially people don't call themselves artists, they're like, oh, please give me a deal. Like, they don't see how valuable their input is. Remember, those producers, those sales agents, you know, those whatever, they have nothing without artists creating great work, right? Otherwise, they have to run their cookie cutter machine, right? They have, and they don't get good stuff out of people who play that game. What they want is the Tarantinos, you know? They want the people who have that special quality, and then they want to be like, okay, well, Tarantino works with us, right? But like, I look at Tarantino, and like, I don't love every film he's done, but some of his films I fucking love. Yeah. But the thing is, I respect everything he's done. But one thing about Tarantino that I really respect is that guy has a vision, and he sticks to his vision, and he seems like a guy that has a fuck you attitude. Like, I don't see you talking to Tarantino and being like, listen, you can't do this. He's going to be like, well, fuck you, I'm going over there, I'm going to make my movie here. And people, and he's so powerful and so prestigious at this point, people just go, no, let him do what he's going to do. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I think as a musician or any artist, my point here is that you got to have a little bit of, I'm outside of the machine, and I know that the machine can benefit off of me, but I'm not going to let them convince me that I need them more than they need me. If that, I don't know how to like, maybe I'm not describing that perfectly right,
but like, you're definitely, you've definitely provoked a lot of different thoughts and ideas from me.
Can I say this one thing?
Of course.
My final point is maybe not they need me, I need them. I don't necessarily want to leave it there, but it's hard to wrap this point up. My point is just that I feel as an artist, you see yourself as bringing a value that's not so tangible in the machine. It's a very it's hard to gauge, like, what is art worth? You know what I mean? But I believe people will come by and they'll say, hey, your art is only worth this, and you might believe them. So you, in your mind, you need to kind of have a certain amount of like, it's not even about what it's worth. It's more like, this is why I did it, and this is my truth, and I don't want to compromise on my truth, you know, just to fit into your machine. And if it doesn't fit into your machine, then maybe I take my art elsewhere. Yeah. You know? Yeah.
So we've talked about on past episodes, you know, how the artist kind of straddles the line of things, right? Like they got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, right? Because you have to be a part of the world, but there's also a part of you that has to be on the outside looking in, right? And through this sort of lens of, you know, like the machine, right? Like an artist, in many ways, your job is to give us inside of the machine a light from outside of it.
Right.
You know,
Totally.
like
It's like
give us something from outside of it to just like bust us out of the thing for a second and go like, oh shit. And, you know, in the case of this singer, you know, he was almost directly singing about it. Like, look at what we're in.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm out here and I'm telling you, look at what we're in. And we're like, oh shit, he's right. So that was one thing that came to mind with what you were saying. And another thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about as well, in terms of, you know, that path, that challenging path that an artist has to take very often, in terms of keeping that honesty and integrity in what they're doing, you know, it can be affected by so many things and so many influences. And sometimes it can, like, you know, you were saying, people from, you know, like these sellers and these producers and stuff like that who want to have input on what you're doing. And it can happen from fans too, you know, like people, like it can come from so many different places. Whereas coming back to the singer that we've been talking about, which I apologize that I have as Oliver Anthony or Anthony Oliver. I can see how, like, just if you were to play devil's advocate here, or just to imagine a scenario where, okay, he signs a record deal, right? And he's got people in his ear who start saying, like, oh, you've got to keep singing about those things. Like, you got to make another song like the one that you did. But as an artist, you've got to go, it's like, but I did that song. Mm-hmm. Right? I did that song. And that's maybe not the true song. That's not the relevant, powerful, that's not the voice that's wanting to be expressed in the next one. Right? But it's like, oh no, the thing that got you success was to do that, so you got to keep on doing that. Mm-hmm. But it can also come from the fans, like, no, you got to keep singing about these things. But it's like, as an artist, you gotta be listening to that voice. You gotta be listening to that muse, and it might take you into a direction that's not what people expect of you. Right. And all the different angles that can come from. And that's a challenging one. But I think that you bringing up someone like Quentin Tarantino, and I mean, you could think of any number of artists in any number of disciplines who have risen to the absolute heights of their art and their craft, and they did it by staying true to such a large degree. Because normally the sellouts don't typically rise to the same kinds of heights, right? The greats whose names we continually, you know, evoke throughout time are the ones who, like, they stayed true to what they were doing, even if they don't always necessarily achieve the thing that they were setting out to do necessarily, or get it quite to that place. There's always that quality of they were doing this true and honest thing that they were trying to express. Mm-hmm. Right? That was the important thing for them to express. And I don't think that that's a selfish thing necessarily, because I think that could go either way. Like, there's an egotistical way of that, and then there's the real true way of that, right? The ego way is just kind of, it's an ego thing as it would imply, right? Like, it's just, you're being this sort of defiant artist because, well, out of some image of being a role. You're playing the role of it. And that's fake. That's fake. Yeah, that's fake. Yeah, you know, and as opposed to, you're doing this because it's the thing you're truly genuinely called to.
You raise a very important point, because I have seen this with filmmakers, and I suppose with maybe some other artists, but I've definitely seen it with young filmmakers who, you know, out of the sake of just kind of being edgy or something, you know, where it's like this defiance is like they're playing, it's fake. It's like a carbon copy. You know, it doesn't feel real. And I think when you're defiant and you have maybe this kind of fuck you attitude, it's not like you don't want to say fuck you to people. That's not what you're trying to do. What you really want is you want people to go, ah, I see it. Okay, like, let's do this. That's what you really want. But when someone goes, like for me, when I was, for example, when I was going to make Soldiers Apocalypse, right? So the first episode I ever made, man, I don't know how much it cost me. It cost me a few grand. But like with wardrobe, I had to do wardrobe. I hired, like, I got professional actors. I did it, but I was connected and whatever. But I remember I was at a Crush Lounge or whatever on Granville Street, right? And there was another fellow in the industry, and we were at the bar, whatever, at some event. We're having a drink there, and he's like, "What's up, Brandon?" Blah blah blah, and we're talking, and I was like, "Well, I want to make this show. I've wanted to make it since I was a kid, and it's about these soldiers, and it's the end of the world, and blah blah blah." He's like, "And I'm gonna do it for under 10 grand." And he goes, "Well, that's impossible. You can't do that." And I was like, "Yeah, I can. I'm going to show you." And he's like, "Ah, it's not, whatever." Sure enough, I did it under 10 grand. But it's like, my fuck you attitude was like, no, I'm not taking in what you say. In your world, you can't, but I can. And I did. And the thing is that, you know, there's lots of things where I think as an artist, you're going to get that feedback from the world because they don't see how it's possible, what you're trying to do. And you need to be able to, and my thing is when I'm saying the fuck you attitude is you need to be able to stick to your guns. And I guess it's more of a, like, I want you to see what I see, but if you don't, like, I'm not going to accept your version of reality here. Because, you know, being creative, I mean, yeah, I think there is some element of when people come to you and they say, "Well, you know how hard it is to be an actor? You know how hard it is to make it in the music industry?" I mean, you can hear that and go, "Yeah, you know what? You're right. It is really hard. I guess I'm going to be a contractor. You know, I'm going to be a laborer. You know, I guess that's what I'm going to do because, you know, that's secure." And some people do that, right? But like, if you have that artist quality, right? You go, "Well, yeah, it's probably true, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway." Because, you know what? I care enough to give it a go. And it is a bit of an experiment. Sometimes you don't know if it's going to work, you know, and I think the other thing too is if it doesn't work the way you're hoping or planning or whatever, I don't think you should walk away like a failure and be like, "Well, they were right." Yeah. You know, I think you should walk away and be like, "Well, whatever. I went after what I wanted. I went after what was my inside, like what was my vision." Or, you know, as you say sometimes, Evan, something was calling me out there and I went and I looked into it, you know? And so I think there's a certain amount of, like, what we're talking about today is, you know, this artist, he had a calling, I believe. You know, something called him to write that song and to share it with the world when he did and all of that. And there was probably also a bit of a, you know, some truth inside of him that he's like, "I just want to spill this out. I need to get it out in some form." And so he went out and did it. And I think there's a certain amount of, like, you know, it's so obvious that it's a success now, but there very well could have been moments and he's like, "Am I being silly to do this? Is this ridiculous? Like, am I off base even singing about this stuff? Like, should I even be doing this?" You know, there's all sorts of doubts that artists rarely talk about that actually happened on their way to success, where they actually almost pulled the plug on the thing that was their breakthrough. Yeah. You know? And so, like you said, I think the point of this conversation is after you hit success is to look back at what got you there and keep that present of mind and heart in the future and not to lose touch with that. Because, you know, one thing I found with, like, no matter how much success you get and no matter where you end up in life, the challenges you face will always be pretty much the same. And so what I mean by that is if you end up, like, going to the left in your life, you go this path down the left, or you go to the right, you will probably find that about the same point in your life that you're feeling exactly the same way you would have had you gone left or right. It just will look different because you'll be on a different path, but the feeling will be exactly the same. So if you're in your life and you're looking like, "Man, I fucked up, I took the wrong path," just understand that if you went the other path, you would be feeling that same thing probably at some point on that path, which would probably be around this time or before or after. So you should never regret your choice. You should just learn from your choice and go, you know what, last time I sold out and I took the safe road. This time I won't. And then if you took the riskier road and you said, well, this time I took the riskier road and it didn't work out, you might go, well, you know, maybe I'll be a little more conservative with a couple things that I, you know, took for granted before. But you learn, because you know, the thing is, even if you chose the right path, something about it is always wrong and something about it is always right. You know what I mean? Like, because there's no real right wrong.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like,
totally. And just even, you know, you brought in this word riskier, and the thought that came to my mind was like, well, riskier to what? Hey everybody, this is Evan, and this episode is brought to you by my book. Yes, I recently released a book called The Actor's Awakening: Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Expand yourself as an actor and your craft through a spiritual perspective. Take a journey that will explore universal philosophies and insights to help you understand human nature in a profound way, and develop practices to take your work to another level. Again, that's The Actor's Awakening: Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe.
Well,
you know, like,
question.
You know, we
yes.
like it's we often say it's like, oh, it's risky. Well, risky to what?
Right.
Like, what are you risking? Right. And I think that when you ask that question, a lot of the things that we're afraid of, you know, of what that risk is a bunch of bullshit. Right? Like, what's really on the line? And it's sort of all of that what's expected of you. Right? What the sort of, to come back to this machine, what the machine expects of you, right? We expect you to have a job like this and to earn so much, to have a paycheck that looks something like this and to live like this, and this is what your lifestyle is, and da 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 da. That's what you're putting up at risk, right? And you've bought into it. You've bought into it.
Totally.
Right?
Often the people telling you how you should live are telling you either to live the way they're living or don't live the way they lived. And the thing is you have to remember, it's all the same advice from the same place anyway. Like, here's the thing, like my parents, you know, they were like, well, this is what you need to do, and your life should look like us. And then when I hit, you know, and that's mostly the message I got up until I was 14. Sorry, I didn't want to take away from you. But then when I was 14 and a half, right, we had a mansion that was 8,000 square feet, and we had a camper, and we had a Porsche, and we had a boat, and we had all these cars, and I had like 3 backyards, and I had all this shit. And, you know, my parents seemed like they had it all together. And then, you know, and then when I was about 14 or so, like, I knew we had some money struggles were happening around that time and whatever. I won't get into the details of that event, but long story short, my parents got divorced. They split up. We lost the house. We lost all our money. I went from living in a mansion to living in a trailer park for a period of time, and then things kind of balanced out again. But, you know, I was about 14, 15 years old. And all my whole life had been, this is what you got to do. This is who you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. This is our advice. And then I looked at their life and I'm like, well, you fucking lost everything. You're broken up. You hate each other. And this sucks. And I'm like, I'm not modeling that. I don't want this for my life. Like, what a bunch of bullshit. Like, honestly, what a bunch of bullshit. And I was happier in the fucking trailer park than I was in the mansion, because it was the first time in my life I ever got to spend any real time with my dad. Yeah. And so my dad's telling me, oh, you know, it's going to be so hard in the trailer park. And I'm thinking, this is fucking great, man. When's the last time you and I sat down and made a sandwich together? Never. You know what I mean? And like, it was like, you're telling me that I'm supposed to be rich and successful and do all this stuff. And I'm thinking, so that's when, like, I had a big transition in my life, because I was going down the road, Evan. Like, I was pretty big into sports, but I was getting pretty committed to being an architect. I was in an advanced drafting and design program. My grades were through the roof, and I was going to be an engineer. a fucking engineer. I turned out as an artist. How fucking far different could you go? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the thing is, I didn't realize what called me to engineering was the artistry of being able to design buildings and houses and shit, the art of it. I didn't know this at the time because I didn't even know I was really an artist yet.
Yeah.
And then what ended up happening was I found film kind of the next year. And I was like, this is fucking amazing. We bring all these people together. We get to create and imagine and have fun. This is stuff I used to do as a kid. I came home that summer. I said, I'm dropping out of drafting. I told my family, I'm dropping out of drafting and design, like this program that I fucking earned my way into. And I'm becoming a filmmaker. And my family was like, what the fuck happened to Brandon over the summer? You know what I mean? Like, but the thing is like, that's the thing, man, is like your whole world can just break apart in a moment. And the way you're seeing things today isn't necessarily how you see it. But I'll tell you what I saw. And this is the last thing I'll say, Evan. I saw something true for me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, regardless of what happens for me in film, from this point forward, I lived my dream as a filmmaker. I have satisfied that full-heartedly to this point. Whether I do any more of it or I just move on and go do something else, that's fine. But I fulfilled that dream in my life. There's definitely no mistakes in that for me. But there were moments where I was like, did I fuck up?
Yeah.
You know, there were moments where I'm like, oh man, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I should have become an engineer. Maybe I should have just, you know. But like, here's the thing. Like, I'd be an engineer going, man, I wish I chased my fucking film career.
Yeah, what if I had pursued that? What would have happened?
That's the recognition I came to at a certain point, and then I realized, you know what, man? You go left, you go right. You went right. That's your choice, man, and that's where you are today. So let's work with that. Let's not sit and think, oh, engineer would have been better. Who knows if it would have been better? I might have just repeated the same patterns that my family did, ended up divorced. Maybe I had all this money and lost it. Who knows what would have happened? I might have just done the same thing over, you know? But I took a different road. And, you know, it's had its fucking interesting moments. I'll give you that. But
yeah, I mean, it's...
Right?
It's
still related to what we're talking about,
for sure,
isn't it?
For sure.
It hasn't gone too far off.
I've this is another thing I've definitely repeated on past podcasts, but it's like it was a piece of acting advice that was not actually given to me, but it was when I was studying Meisner, and it was another Meisner teacher who was taking the class, who we were in the part where we were actually doing scenes and putting up scenes and stuff, and he was an older guy, he was a professor, and he was doing a scene with a young guy who was a college student, and they had the scene, and so this kid was having just such a hard time. Like he was just struggling with he wasn't where he wanted to be, you know, walking into the scene, you know, like from the very moment, like you could just see, like he was just, because I saw it run a number of times, and you could see him beating himself up the moment that he was walking in the door. He's just like, oh, I'm not in the place I want to be to do this scene. I'm not there yet. I hadn't connected or clicked, whatever it was. And I remember at a certain point, the scene went up and it took off. Like it really, like it had a whole, this sort of baggage had been largely lifted from him. And I found out that his Larry McDonald from well, no, he wasn't from Long Island, but where was he from? He's from New York, though. And he told him just at a certain point, because he could see him just struggling, beating himself up, and he just said, like, hey, look, man, whatever you got, you trust it. Whatever you, and like I was, as advice for an actor, it's great, but I'm just, even in the context of this conversation and your life, look, wherever you are, right, whatever you've got, you gotta just trust it, because what's the sense in that game of like, well, what if I went and did that thing? Well, as you've been illustrating, you'd be just on the other side of that thing. It's like, well, what if I took that path?
Yeah.
Right? Whatever you got, trust it. like wherever you are, whichever path you took, trust it. That was the path that you were supposed to take.
You know, it's something interesting. We talk about the path a lot, and this just came up for me as you were talking about that, was that we often look at the path in our life as, say, A to Z, like A to B, whatever, right? So it's like, I walk and I might go along these lines, they're wiggly, but like I'm like getting there. I'm here and I'm trying to get there. And we forget that our path is also wide as it is long. And so, like for me, one of the things that I came to a realization in my 30s was the width of my, or the depth, if you want to look at it that way, but the width of my path changed. Like, and let me give you context for what I mean. The way I was walking my path through my 20s and when I entered my 30s was very largely the machine of my family. And the machine, not just of my family, but of my upbringing with sports, of my life experience. And so it was very narrow. It was a very kind of rigid approach to, this is how we do life and this is what you do. And, you know, my dad used to say this thing, which I don't agree with anymore, but I lived by this quote. He said, you know, young babies cry for it, grown men die for it, recognition. And I used to think, fuck, that's it, recognition. That's what this life is about. You got to get recognized. You got to either cry for it or you got to die for it. But that's what it's about. And you know what? I'll tell you something. Recognition is a very fucking seductive thing. Because when you get recognized, man, the fucking beautiful women come out. Fucking the friends want to be your friends. People want to do deals with you. Money fucking flows. People think you're a big deal. You walk around like hot shit. It feels good. It's very seductive. The problem is now you're walking around like a big deal and your path is a big deal. And so if you wander a little left of the path, then you're not a big deal anymore. Well, I can't go there. I'll lose my recognition. You're strapped to this thing. And so like when I hit 30, I realized recognition was a bunch of bullshit. And then that's what I realized, because, you know, I started to realize, you know, my friends aren't really my well, not all of them, some of them were, but a lot of these people are not really my friends. They're just here because I can offer them something. You know, a lot of this stuff that's in my life is not meaningful. It's not important. It's not really what I want. It's, you know, it like looks good. And you know what? I can't tell anybody how I really fucking feel. And like everybody thinks I'm doing so well, but you know what? There's days I come home and I feel sad and I have no one to talk to about that. And no one wants to hear that shit from me, you know? And so the thing is that I broke down. I've talked about this. I had a spiritual awakening, but what I realized is the path became wide. And I could wander off to the left and wander off to the right on the same path. And I could not be a big deal on the same path that I was walking. And I could be a big deal, and it became kind of a freedom. And I became more expansive as a person. And I think when we walk our path, we choose a direction and we think, oh, the path's very narrow, I got to stay on that path. No. Yeah. As you evolve as a person, the path just opens up to where there are no bounds on the path anymore. Like when you start the path, I kind of see it this way, and maybe I'm wrong, but this is my interpretation, but it's like I see a narrow path I can walk this way, a narrow path that way, and a narrow path this way or something. But then when I got further along the path, I was like, you know what, all these paths led to the same place, and it's just a big wide open field, and I can go anywhere on the field now. Right? So it changed, and I just realized I was free to do anything. And I was the one that put the trees and barriers in between me that didn't let me go in certain places before. And those, when I had my spiritual awakening, all that debris in the way just got kind of eradicated. And I was like, oh, I could go over here and I can go over there. And no one says shit. Like everyone's like, oh, Brandon was, you know, he was doing this a little while ago. Now he's riding a motorcycle, and now he's living off in Alberta, and now he's like whatever. And people are like, "Cool, man, what's going on?" It's like I just do what the fuck I want, and you know, I don't have to stick to any path anymore. But if I want to, I will. Yeah. Right. But that's the thing, is when you have that freedom, you just see options that you didn't see before.
Yeah, I mean, there's at any moment we can just do something completely out of the ordinary.
Totally.
Like at any moment. Which is pretty wild to think about. right? And almost
just,
even a little bit scary to think about if you
'cause
really think about it.
you're just going down a path for a long time, maybe 40 years, maybe 50 years, 60, I don't know, whatever. You name the decade. And then all of a sudden, at one point, you just go, you know what? I'm going to hang a hard left. And I'm just going to go this way. And everyone's like, what the hell? And it's like, oh, they're having a midlife crisis. It's like, no, they just like...
Did you hear about Doug?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's like, oh, my goodness, is he okay? Yeah.
But there's artistry in that, right? Because I think that's the thing about an artist. An artist sees options where most people don't. That's really what creativity is.
Well, I think the thing is with living the sort of, you know, maybe not just like the artist, but like the artist mindset is like, well, it's, you know, what is guiding you? What is your North Star, right? And continue, and that requires a lot of trust and a lot of faith in that thing that's in you, right? To keep going that way, right? Like, because that thing is, and you know, it's not a thing that's just in the same place in the sky all the time, right? Like, and it's like you've got to keep finding it and following it and following it. It'll never steer you wrong, right? But I think the challenge is that there are so many temptations and distractions that make us take our eye off of our North Star. Right. And that's in many ways, I guess, the challenge that is maybe the biggest challenge that's issued to the artist. And when I say artist, I hope that what I just said is fairly self-evident, that it's not simply just an applicable thing to artists, because again, we are all creators and artists of our own lives, and what an artist does is not wholly different from being a human being, right? And being an artist is, I think, in many ways about being a whole human being. You know, it's that path of understanding who and what we are, right? And that's a never-ending journey. That's a never-ending
there's
process.
no destination to get.
There's no destination. There's no arrival point. Yes, and you know, art is just kind of a cool thing to do in a human life, you know,
and sometimes that's all it has to be.
And that's all it has to be. Yeah, like it doesn't have to be something, and that's where I think that artists are most powerful. Artists are most powerful when it's not trying to be something, you know. It's not trying to be anything other than what its most truthful manifestation is, right? Like it's being created for its own sake. Like we love Alan Watts around here. I mean, he has a fairly famous lecture that gets, you know, played in all kinds of channels and stuff, where he says, you know, like when it comes, especially with something like music or well, I mean, any art form you can take on, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But if you look, he used like music and dance as like his two to draw attention to this. But it's like, well, dance isn't all about like just the final movement, right? If art was all about how we sort of approach our day-to-day life of like just trying to get somewhere, well, then dancing would be all but pointless. So would music, because it would all just be about, we're going to just play and do that big final moment, and then that'll be it. But how dumb is that? How dumb would that be? But in the same thing, if you're an actor or a writer, you are a storyteller. How dumb would a story be if you just we're shown the climax, the end, without any context of what brought everybody there. Without it might be kind of interesting, I suppose, but like it would lose so much of its meaning. It would lose so much of its impact because you don't know the rest of the movement that was going on leading up to it, right?
Well, TV has proven that point more than anything these days as one of our mediums of art. Because if you think about it, TV, like, some shows, they go into the 20s, for episodes, but like, let's say even 6 episodes or 13 episodes. I mean, how much of this normalcy of this people's lives are, like, and you're sitting around for an hour watching that, and we're totally engaged. I mean, there's great shows, and they capture us around stuff that, there isn't that much happening. I mean, if you really look at it, it's like sometimes it's a conversation and just some interesting information is being revealed, and you love the show, and so they revealed that information, like, oh man, it was so good. But it's like, yeah, but like there's no car chase or explosion or nothing like big happened. But it's like we get involved, and then we care about these characters, and these characters, they do something, and it affects our view of them, our perception of them, our relationship with them. And so I think what's interesting about this conversation for me is recognizing at this moment that, we have this artist. We started off talking about how he boomed up. There's a whole relationship that he has before he had this big moment of success, and there will be a relationship he has with himself carrying on until his last days after this moment. And and I think that as just people, we look at our lives as like, you might have these like great moments in your life, and you can there's all sorts of decisions that will be in front of you, but what you can do and what's the right move and what's the right way to go. I think the thing is to look at it and go like, this is a moment in my journey, and tomorrow will be another moment in my journey, or this next minute will be another moment. And you look at it and you go, can I be truthful in the next moment as I was in this one? Because the next moment is going to bring its interesting things, and the moment after that's going to bring its interesting things. And I love this analogy about the North Star, because I loved how that analogy of shiny things capture our attention. And it's such a great example of, I got this North Star, I know what I'm doing, I'm going this way, and then all of a sudden, shiny thing over here, hey, you want this? It looks just like the shiny thing you were after, and you're like, yeah, I kind of like that too. You know what? Actually, you know what? Yeah. Let me go over this shiny thing, and then all of a sudden you're fucking off course, because that wasn't your shiny thing, and you took a fake. You went down the wrong road. But I think if you do, and we're going to do this occasionally, you're going to lose track of your North Star, and you just can't see it sometimes. The clouds are out, whatever. Let's just use that analogy. Yeah. And you go, well, I'll follow this shiny thing because it's the best I got. And then you realize a little ways down that path, you're like, I'm on the wrong fucking path. If you can recognize that, you just fucking saved yourself. Yeah. And then just correct course. But I don't think we should look at it like, oh, I made a mistake, I totally screwed up my life. No, sometimes you can make probably a million mistakes and still keep finding your way back to the right path. Because like, that's the thing about the North Star. If you're using the North Star as your guide, you could walk way off, and then the North Star is still the North Star. You just head north again. You know what I mean? Like, so you got distracted and you went off on this path. Yeah. You can still always recorrect yourself to whatever that truth is.
Yeah, when you realize like, oh, this isn't taking me home. Yeah. Right? Like, this isn't taking... And, yes. And you have that realization, and then you just got to stop for a second. You've got to look around, right? Just take a look and go, oh, okay. There we go.
Don't beat yourself up if you found yourself in a place that you didn't want to be in, Yeah. I think everybody to some degree ends up in that every now and then.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's in many ways part of it. It's part of what goes with the whole human thing is and it's part of what makes us human is understanding that, having been through that and going through that. Because if we just, I don't know, how would we relate and connect to each other if we didn't have some understanding of what that's like, to get completely lost, to have gone so completely off course from our North Star. And because then we can talk about that. We can share that sort of part of the adventure, of life, and it's all the more meaningful when you know what it's like to have gone off course and to find your way back to it, right? Like that's like, oh, okay, went and did that, and yeah, like it had its own glitter. It had, I love that you sort of brought in the rest of the night sky, so to speak, into the analogy, because it's like, yeah, like it's like the sky is filled with all of these lights, but we're talking about like, what is your North Star? And if you follow some other ones, I mean, I'm sure you're going to still see some interesting things. It's going to take you to some interesting places. But ultimately you've got to go back, you've got to go back to that true thing. Cause otherwise, yeah, you're following a light to somewhere that isn't your home. Right?
Yeah. I think that's the thing is like, there's that quote that you've said before is like, we're all just walking each other home. And I think that, as that
was Ram Dass, I think, who said that. Just feel like I got to give him credit.
Yeah, of course. I was hoping you would. And so as you're traveling your path, you'll find other travelers walking that path with you who have the same goal in mind and the same direction. And sometimes you'll have a friend who gets distracted by a shiny thing and they go, oh, I want to go over here. And you got to make a decision. Do I want to join my friend on this, excursion off away from where I was directed, or do I want to part ways and head my path and let them go theirs? And sometimes we think, oh, well, I'll just stay on the North Star. I'll just stay focused on where I'm going and there won't be any problems. And the thing is, what if it's your wife or your husband or your kid? That, and they want, and you just go, well, are you going to stay to your path or are you going to join them on theirs? And, and sometimes people point you in a direction that you find is more truthful for you. And so then you go, you know what? I thought I wanted this, and now this person showed me that this was possible, and I realized this is what I want now. And, and so you might be too stubborn, and you might think, well, the way I was going was the way, and it's like, well, maybe it wasn't the way. At the same time, sometimes we have to be willing to part away from friends or relationships and be like, you're going this way, and I'm going that way, and maybe we'll meet up again, wherever we end up in the future, Anyway, man, I feel like we are at that sweet point of let's just talk about beer and wrap this baby.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Baby's crying in the back room. If anyone hears it, that's the sign. That's the...
Yeah, but either way, I was feeling the time too. But he's just like, hey guys, come on, wrap this baby up.
Wrap it up.
So I got the beer today. I guess I'll introduce.
Yeah.
Old Creeker Cream Ale. Evan, I love a cream ale. So Old Creeker is from Batch 44 Brewery over on the Sunshine Coast in a little place called Seashell. Anyway, it's been delicious. I like the can. It feels very homey. Got a little fisher walking along with his fish on a rod, in kind of a Calvin and Hobbes almost cartoon.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I totally didn't even. But that's definitely like the art style on that can.
Back in the days when the coastal community was knit together by steamships, creekers were known for their quirky ways, self-sufficient, and armed only with rubber boots and handmade fishing rods. They carved out a living in the bush close to a river. The old-timers are gone now, but their feisty spirit remains. Our cream ale speaks to those similar times. It's a West Coast-style blonde ale with a kiss of Amarillo and Centennial hops. Delicious little brew. So
it's been very good, and Sunshine Coast Beer to welcome you to the Sunshine Coast. It's been man, this has been great. Doing this live in person.
Yeah.
Once again, as you said at the beginning, that was...
Well, look, we came back around, didn't we?
We came back around, years of, pandemic, and has, kind of shuffled us, people around into different places, sometimes literally into different places, which is our case, and here we are.
Yeah.
Back once again, reunited in the flesh to do this thing, and it's so great because it feels different.
Yeah.
You know, it's always there's a different feeling when you're there with the person.
Yeah,
and
totally.
we're doing this, and it's good. It's good. So.
Well, yeah, man, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be in the room with you as we talk about this stuff. I guess I'll wrap it up and leave it with you to finish on today's episode with Brandon and Evan. Well, man, you know, I don't like it's strange because like I love this conversation, although I'm walking away going, wait, what did we talk about? What was the point of all this? It started out with a breakthrough kind of song from an artist that's really made a profound impact. I think the thing that, you know, and maybe we didn't talk about this a lot, but you know, I think if you speak your truth, you might find that other travelers hear your, what I would call that song is a war cry. And I think a lot of us travelers heard his voice and went, yeah, I feel that too. And it I'm not going to necessarily say it gave us a North Star, but it all kind of made us look sideways and say, hey, you're on the same path as me. Like we're all kind of walking the path together, and some of us are laborers, and some of us are architects, and some of us are filmmakers, and some of us are musicians, and some of us are whatever. But the thing is we all looked around and said, hey, you know what? We might be walking different paths in our own little worlds, but we're all on the same path together here. And that's what art does in a way. It all of a sudden it takes away all the debris in between all of us, and we just see, hey, you know what? You're doing that and I'm doing this, but we're still walking the same path. How fucking cool is that? Mm-hmm. So I think that's what this conversation has kind of brought light to me, is that I thought I was separate. I heard that song and I realized I wasn't as separate as I thought. Yeah,
that song really was the driver of this conversation in terms of like just again the power of art, of something just coming from such a deep and honest place, and the effect that can have, right? And it's huge. It can be a huge effect. And earlier on I was talking a little bit about like copycats. You're probably going to see like a bunch of people coming out of the woodwork, so to speak, and try and sort of just do what he did. And I don't want to paint that all with a really bad brush necessarily. I think that there will be people who are just trying to be opportunists mm-hmm. with the whole thing and again exploit the situation. And that's the concern, on the bad end of things. But the thing is that there's also inspiration to come from it. And I hope that something like this moment and this story of this person inspires people. Watch that. That's the thing as an artist you got to do. You got to watch and learn to decipher that difference between, it's like, oh, am I being inspired, or am I just trying to copy? Mm-hmm. Am I just trying to replicate, right? And in which case you got to recognize it's like, okay, that's a contrived thing. But take the inspiration of someone who just went for it, like just absolutely opened their heart up to the world and let this thing pour through them. What would you say,
right,
if you did the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Forget about what he said. What would you say?
Right.
What's that thing inside of you? Be inspired to do that thing.
Can I add one thing? Just
yeah, of course.
And also, sometimes you might feel like you would say the same thing, but the way you would say it is also important.
Yes.
Because maybe you have a different way of saying it, and that's also valid. And you might say, like, I want to say what he said, but don't say it the way he said. Maybe you say what he said, but say it your way. Mm-hmm. And in other cases, maybe you say it the same way he does, and you feel that's resonating with you, but you say different things the same way. So as artists,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a little nuanced, but if as long as it's true, I think it's okay.
Yeah, and nobody can tell you what that is.
Right.
Only you know deep down what that thing is, whether the way in which you're saying it is truly coming from you, or does that are you taking from someone else? Is that not quite you? Is that you just trying to sound like somebody else or whatever? Like that's something that you've got to learn to decipher for yourself. But ultimately, yeah, like be inspired by these moments and the power that art has, and that power comes from that naked, vulnerable, courageous expression of what's true inside of you. Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.